Japan, this year's Group of Seven G7 president, hosted the Leaders Summit at Hiroshima from 19th to 21st of May. Leaders of G7 member countries, including France, United States, the UK, Germany, Japan, Italy and Canada, alongside the European Union or EU, gathered to discuss the foremost challenges defining global geopolitics as well as global economy. Japan categorically argued the urgency of upholding the international order based on rule of law by decisively rejecting any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force or the threat to use nuclear weapons and outreach to the global south. Prime Minister Kishida invited the G20 president this year, India, along with Indonesia, Vietnam, Australia, South Korea, the Comoros, Cook Islands and Brazil as guests. As the G7 president, Japan underscored that as the world is facing an unprecedented crisis by aggression against Ukraine and the growing risk of use of weapons of mass destruction, Hiroshima was chosen as the venue to remind the realities of the nuclear weapon use and emphasize preciousness of peace. In this regard, Prime Minister Narendra Modi demonstrated India's commitment to peace by unveiling Mahatma Gandhi's bust in Hiroshima, epitomizing the ideals of peace. One of the key objectives of Prime Minister Modi is to create more synergy between India's G20 and Japan's G7 presidencies in seeking solutions to pressing issues of health, climate change, energy, food security, infrastructure, gender, and so on. The discussion in Hiroshima was anchored on critical challenges, and India contributed in the sessions on working together to address multiple crises, addressing food security, fertilizer supply chain, health and development challenges, common endeavor for a resilient and sustainable planet, anchored on the challenges of climate, energy and environment, and towards a peaceful, stable and prosperous world, where Prime Minister Modi emphasized the need to reform the UN on one hand and urged to respect the UN Charter, international law and sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries on the other. In the 1970s, following the oil crisis and the collapse of the fixed exchange rate system, developed economies realized the need of building a platform to comprehensively discuss policy coordination on macroeconomic issues. As such, then French President Giscard d'Estaing proposed the Maiden Summit in 1975 at the Château de Rambouillet with participation from France, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan and Italy. Japan is not new to hosting G7 summits. This is the 7th time Japan hosted the summit as the G7 president. Previously, it hosted leaders' summits in Tokyo in 1979, 1986 and 1993, Kyushu, Okinawa in 2000 and Hokkaido, Toyako in 2008. And Hiroshima in 2016. In addition to the G7 summit, Prime Minister Modi engaged in deft diplomacy on the sidelines, conducting a series of bilateral meetings with his counterparts, including Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, advancing cooperation on skill development, tourism, green hydrogen, technology, semiconductors and digital infrastructure. Mr. Modi met with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, in which he observed that the conflict in Ukraine is not a political or economic issue, but an issue of humanity, of human values, and conveyed India's support for dialogue and diplomacy. During the Prime Minister's meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, pertinent issues including co-production and manufacturing in defense sector, civil nuclear cooperation, renewable energy and trade were discussed. India-UK FTA negotiations and cooperation in science and technology featured in the meeting with the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Additionally, there were meetings with leaders of Vietnam, Indonesia, South Korea, Germany, Brazil, amongst others. Besides the G7, the spotlight was also at the Quad Leaders meeting, which was originally scheduled to take place in Sydney on 24th of May. Despite the developments in US domestic politics over debt ceiling, the leaders ensured to maintain the productive momentum of the Quad. The key takeaways from the meeting includes launch of Clean Energy Supply Chains Initiative, Quad Infrastructure Fellowships Program, Partnership for Cable Connectivity and Resilience, Quad Investors Network to advance investments in strategic technologies, and the release of the ORAN Security Report to support industry investment in open, interoperable and secure telecom platforms. India will be hosting the 2024 Quad Leaders Summit. India has played a constructive role at the global stage, and as G20 President, Prime Minister Modi stepped up strategic coordination in premier forums, involved in nuanced debate on geopolitical and geo-economic challenges of the post-pandemic world, as India has vital stakes in the stability of the global system.